Soldiers see a lot of things in those jungles best left behind. I know you think you saw something. You believe it. But it's your mind playing tricks. Because what you really saw, you don't want to ever think about again. Today, on the Comic Book Report, we're taking a look at Junkyard Joe, the Deluxe Edition, from Ghost Machine. Stick around and check it out. Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I'm very excited to be back in the world of Ghost Machine's Unnamed universe with Junkyard Joe the Deluxe Edition. In the past I've done reviews for the Geiger Deluxe Edition, trade paperback, and even the Junkyard Joe trade paperback collection, but we're back here with the Deluxe and I can't wait to talk to you about it today. We received this copy in exchange for review from Ghost Machine, so to all of our contacts over there, thank you so much for sending the book. If you're interested in this collection, please consider supporting this release. Now let's go ahead and get started with today's review. First, some quick facts about today's collection. The issues in this volume were written by Geoff and penciled by Gary Frank. The comics in this volume were first published by Image Comics via their Ghost Machine imprint in 2022. The volume itself collects Junkyard Joe, issues 1 through 6. And finally, this is an oversized hardcover edition with nice glossy print paper stock, what looks like could be a glued binding, and a total of 208 pages. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and issue a general spoiler warning. I will be flipping through the contents of today's collection and commenting on plot points throughout. You've been advised. Okay, and here's our first look at that Junkyard Joe Deluxe Edition from Ghost Machine. A really beautiful cover here. We have the dog tags in the snow with a couple drops of blood. I should note that there is another cover available for this Deluxe Edition. I will go ahead and throw up a quick thumbnail of that just so you can see what's out there and you can compare for yourself when you decide which copy you may like to get. The minimalism of my cover is pretty nice and striking, but I do think the one that has all the character models is also quite good. Transitioning now to the spine design for this Junkyard Joe Deluxe Edition, I really love the color we have on the spine. I think it's gorgeous. That juxtaposed with the kind of white lettering, I just think everything pops really nice. As you can see, in addition to the title of the work and the creators, things like that, we also have the Image Comics publisher logo up top and the Ghost Machine imprint logo at the bottom. Now, this particular Deluxe Edition does not have a dust jacket, similar to the Geiger Deluxe Edition they released commercially, I think a year or so ago. On the back cover of this collection, we get some great images of Junkyard Joe in action, his face. Again, you get an idea of what Gary Frank's art style looks like here. Really like it, definitely indicative of the art we have inside the book. Alright, now let's go ahead and transition over to a quick look at the book's binding. It's a little bit hard for me to tell here, but I do believe this is a glued binding. I think I might see a little glue there, but the binding is incredible. No complaints from me. The pages lay down quite well. At a collection over 200 pages, it's not an over large collection, but I am happy to report the binding is still exceptional. We do have some kind of white gutters along some of the panels, which is nice because there really is little to no gutter loss. Okay, now I did want to go ahead and do some size comparisons for those that don't realize exactly how big this book is. So I have it next to the standard edition trade paperback that they released not too long ago. This is kind of the same contents as far as the issues, but just in a standard trade paperback format. So standard size is just the size of a single issue copy comic book. So this is, again, your standard trade paperbacks are all roughly the size of that. So this is a gigantic upgrade from the paperback they released. For more scale comparisons, here's this release next to an omnibus edition from DC Comics. This, of course, is Justice League the New 52 Omnibus Volume 1, also a Geoff Johns work, but as you can see, this edition towers over even this omnibus edition. This is an absolutely massive book, and it showcases Gary Frank's art absolutely masterfully. In fact, I didn't have a ton of releases that were this tall prior to these collections. I am happy to report this lines up trim size and everything wise like the Geiger Deluxe Edition they released not too long ago as well. In fact, let me go ahead and do some side-by-sides with the Geiger Deluxe Edition, also from Geoff Johns and Gary Frank over at Ghost Machine. So both of these books are in the Unnamed universe, which is a shared comic book universe over at Ghost Machine. Basically, it takes sort of these newly created kind of American folkloric characters. In Geiger, it is the character of Geiger. In Junkyard Joe, you guessed it, it's Junkyard Joe. Anyway, both of these deluxe editions came away by Ghost Machine, and they're beautiful. Both this gigantic size, and they line up quite well together on the bookcase. Here's a quick look at the spines of both of these collections together, again to give you an idea what they might look like on your bookcase. I'm so happy with them. It's great to see these released in such a prestige and well cared for format. If you're interested in more details about the deluxe editions or the paperbacks for either Junkyard Joe or Geiger, I'll try to link the videos in this video just so you can get a look at some of the other offerings here. Okay, and with the build of the book out of the way, let's go ahead and dive into today's collection. And after some beautiful end pages, we have a title page, publication information, creator breakdown kind of page, and then we really jump into the first issue of Junkyard Joe. And wow, does it begin with a bang. We have a kind of comic strip panel of the Junkyard Joe comic, which is sort of the comic within a comic. In this universe, the central character of Muddy Davis is a United States military veteran who served in the Vietnam War. After leaving the service, he created a comic strip loosely based on his exploits, this time kind of making it a little more comedic and lighthearted. It's really in the same genre as something like Beetle Bailey, if you're familiar with that comic strip. But essentially, in this universe, he basically had this comic strip, and it got really popular throughout like the 70s and 80s. But this is how Junkyard Joe opens up, and then we jump right into the Vietnam conflict, the Vietnam War, and we get this flashback where Muddy Davis is a soldier. They're in the jungles of Vietnam, and they get ambushed. He's with his kind of platoon, and we just get to see this kind of period piece war story of these band of brothers who are in this jungle. In their kind of regiment, in their little group here, we have this cadet who's sort of quiet and to himself. After some violence or some explosions, we basically have it revealed that this cadet is actually a robot. This is Junkyard Joe himself, and he was put in this unit. We're not really sure why. Although they are immediately skeptical of the robot, they ultimately welcome in with open arms, and they kind of go through this mission together in the jungles. However, things go from bad to worse, and most of this troop are unfortunately killed, and we have Muddy Davis, one of the few survivors of this incident, and he's basically in kind of a military medic tent, and he's kind of telling and doing a debrief of what happened, and he talks about Joe, Junkyard Joe, this robot, and they basically said there was no robot, and you have to stop talking like this, otherwise we have to basically send you to like a psych ward. And so sometime after this, he gets to go home, he's released from his service, and he creates this comic strip. After that, we flash forward, I believe in issue 2, to the present day. This takes place decades and decades after issue 1, which was a nice touch as well, and we basically have Muddy Davis, who's now kind of retiring from the Junkyard Joe comic strip. We find that he's an old man who's recently lost the love of his life. She passed away, sadly, shortly before the events of this comic. We have him sitting there kind of in a weird state of life. He has some new next-door neighbors who themselves are dealing with some life changes. It's basically now a dad by himself with his 3 young children. One of them is kind of an aspiring artist or of some kind, and ultimately they find out they're next to this famous person who's become a little bit of a recluse. We also have Junkyard Joe basically knocking on Muddy Davis's door. Muddy has sort of a mental break, believing like, oh, I was told you weren't real, I believed you weren't real, but he proves himself to be real, and it brings it all back, and he says, you know, I knew I wasn't crazy, I knew you were real. At any rate, along the way, Muddy Davis and Junkyard Joe kind of reunite and reconnect. Junkyard Joe never speaks throughout this, but we have a lot of verbal and kind of hand cues as he tries to communicate. But throughout this as well, we get to see how the war really affected them both. In fact, Junkyard Joe is revealed to have a lot of post-traumatic stress as a result of his battles, and he kind of gets set off by different like loud, sharp noises or things, and he's kind of back in the war in many ways in his programming or in his mind. And it's just really wild wild to see. We have Muddy Davis trying to comfort him and bring him back down. And in the back, we have kind of a looming shadow of this group of kind of dark, sort of mercenary looking people. There seems to be a guy in sort of a robotic mask that seems to be on the hunt for Junkyard Joe. So we don't really know what's happening. There's kind of a central mystery here. After all this time, where was Junkyard Joe? Who created him? What was his purpose in that military group? And who is trying to pick him up now? Who's trying to hunt him? Across the course of the next handful of issues, we have Muddy Davis ultimately get to know and then befriend some of his neighbors, especially the children. Their combined efforts, along with Junkyard Joe's, kind of help lift Muddy Davis out of the central stupor and kind of depression he's been in since the loss of his wife, which is completely understandable. But they kind of help him socialize again and get him plugged into the community. He's able to see how much his wife enriched the community and the people around him, and how they're all kind of grieving her in their own way, which was something he was not connected to when he decided to isolate. I really, really love the themes of isolation and community throughout this. We have layers of that as well with the military brotherhood, but I think there's a lot of complex themes going on throughout this work that I really appreciate, and appreciate it more even given time after I first read this. But anyway, along the way, we have those group of people trying to capture Junkyard Joe. We have a lot of great fights and conflicts throughout this, and essentially the 6 issues culminate in a final kind of standoff between those groups trying to capture Junkyard Joe and Junkyard Joe himself. He's called back into action to kind of prevent and defend his now kind of de facto family or group of friends or allies here. It's a really stunning climax, and ultimately, after they are defeated, Junkyard Joe is almost going to be captured by these kind of men in black government agents, but the townsfolk basically step in and kind of surround him and basically say, he's one of us, you can't really take him. And then we flash forward a few months, and Junkyard Joe is at a kind of backyard barbecue with this neighborhood family next door and Muddy Davis, and it's this really wonderful moment. And then we have little bits of flashes of Geiger and perhaps the Redcoat, some other characters from this unnamed universe, teasing that Junkyard Joe will be instrumental in future works. Now, I'm glossing over some details here or there, but that's the overall shape and kind of synopsis of some of the plot of Junkyard Joe, these issues here. I want to go ahead and speak a few moments about the artwork here from the incredible Gary Frank. I absolutely love his pencil work. I think everything is vibrant, lush, and interesting. I also like that we got a cool juxtaposition in this book between the humid, hot jungles of Vietnam in that first issue and kind of the snowy American landscape we get for the duration of most of the rest of the series. The fact that we also get some of the story back in the 70s and some of the story in the modern day. It's just really cool to see how this artist kind of adapts to these changing elements, and we get a broader range of what Gary Frank can really do and bring to the table here, and I loved that. I also really enjoyed how detailed all the different character models were. I don't think any of the characters looked alike whatsoever, which I enjoyed, and I expected no less from Gary Frank. I also just think the character design work for Junkyard Joe himself is absolutely incredible. He's so visually evocative and interesting, and just a compelling character right from the jump. Now, this is the sophomore effort over at Ghost Machine for their Unnamed universe after the creation of Geiger, the kind of radioactive superhero-like character from the future. This is the second chapter. This is Junkyard Joe, and again, he's part of that Unnamed universe, which I alluded to earlier in this video. Again, it's really sort of a take on Americana or American folk heroes, and basically Johns and company are creating all of these new heroes that all kind of pop up around times of war in American history, both past, present, and even future in the case of Geiger, and they're all being kind of taken apart or taken up to sort of band together to solve some kind of bigger problem that is presumably coming just out of view. I am in for the ride here. I'm so into this universe. I can't wait to check out Redcoat once that gets a trade paperback, and I know that this is just the Unnamed. Outside of that, we have so many other comics from Ghost Machine. The other one I really want to check out once it hits collected edition is Rook Exodus. That's not part of the Unnamed universe, but it is still part of the Ghost Machine imprint. I did read a single issue of that, and again, I can't wait for the collected edition. Now, after the actual issues in this collection, we have the extras for this deluxe edition, and I did want to speak to that for a minute. We have a little bit about the Unnamed universe in general, which I like. We kind of have the timeline that I've seen in other collections. Then we have the full cover art, variant cover art gallery. Everything's in oversized spread here. I love it. I just think it looks so great. You get all the different variant covers, which is always really cool. I like seeing them kind of reproduced here, larger than life. Beautiful, beautiful printing here. After that, we do do have a very special kind of dedication to a lot of veterans, particularly those related to a lot of the creators here. This I saw as well in the trade paperback, but I love that this was included in this deluxe edition as well, a really loving tribute to some of our armed servicemen and women here in the States. Now after that, we have a brand new extra that was not included in the trade paperback. This is the military industrial commentary. It's essentially a breakdown kind of page by page, not every single page, but a collection of pages, and it's all of the different creators kind of talking about what they were going for, what they thought about specific pieces, or what they were trying to do across a given page or work within the comic. I really loved this as a behind the scene feature. What I read of this I thought was just so standout and interesting. For those that maybe liked this collection and wanted more information, this is where you get it. If you want more features from the creators, this is what we have here. I loved that this was included in this work. In between all of the excerpts from the creators here talking about the different commentary behind the scenes, we have some art as well reproduced. I just really liked it, how they have it all laid out. It looks really beautiful. And again, this is really the exclusive special feature for this collection. Most of the rest of this was included in that trade paperback release, albeit not at this beautiful oversized scale. After this commentary portion, we do have some nice end pages again, a cool logo, and then that is really the end here for Junkyard Joe the Deluxe Edition. Again, an absolute stunning release from Ghost Machine. Whether it was the single issues, digital, trade paperback, or now this beautiful deluxe size, Junkyard Joe has been a series I've followed for a while now, and this is probably the most prestige edition that I could hope for. All of the issues beautifully set in this oversized format, an absolute treat for fans out there of Ghost Machine's Unnamed universe. And now all that's left to do is to give it a grade. For a story that's impact is still reverberating with me even a year or so after initially reading, complete with some of the most gorgeous art in modern comic history, the Comic Book Report is happy to give Junkyard Joe the Deluxe Edition from Ghost Machine an A-. I consider this a must-read modern comic. If you're someone who likes the superhero genre of comics but want more of an independent feel, you have to check out the Unnamed universe. Geoff Johns is in rare form here, and Gary Frank has perhaps never looked sharper. These deluxe oversized editions are clearly a label of love, and I can't wait to see Ghost Machine hopefully give us more and more in years to come. In the comments section, I'd love to hear, have you read Junkyard Joe, Geiger, or anything else released by Ghost Machine? What do you think of this imprint, these series, these stories? I would love to get some good conversations going, and thank you all so much for watching. Another huge thank you to all of those at Ghost Machine for providing this review copy in exchange for an honest review. It means the world. And for everyone else, until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please consider giving this video a like, a comment, and maybe share this video with a friend. Thanks everyone, have a good one.